this edition of FedGov Today with Francis Rose, the new bottom line for taking over procurement at GSA.
At the end of the day, if agencies can't get what they need to meet their missions, no amount of savings is going to address that problem.
Former GSA Administrator Emily Murphy on FedGov Today in just a moment. First, though, a new tech and cyber leader at the Pentagon. Katie Arrington's performing the duties of the Chief Information Officer of the Department of Defense. You can watch her first media engagement in her new job on demand anytime at fedgovtoday.com and the FedGov Today YouTube channel. The General Services Administration will be the central buying hub of the federal government again under an executive order President Trump signed recently. It could be the first step toward a broader realignment of the management of the executive branch. Emily Murphy's founder and CEO of Government Procurement Strategies, senior fellow at the George Mason University Baroni Center of Government Contracting, and former administrator of GSA. Emily, welcome. It's great to see you again. What's your sense of the structural changes that would have to happen in order for GSA to take over a vast majority, it sounds like, of the buying that the federal government does? Welcome.
Thanks, Francis. It's great to be with you again. I think the first thing that GSA really is going to need to do is talk to the other agencies. And I know that they've already started this, so I don't mean it to sound like I'm giving them new advice there, but there really needs to be a lot of intense coordination with other agencies about what the contracts are, which ones are agency mission specific, which ones have enough common elements that they make sense to consolidate. GSA has already made some progress actually with contract writing systems. We worked on the common standards for contract writing systems back in the first Trump administration. And I think they've been able to use some of that work to bring in SBA and OPM and other agencies already under GSA handling all their contracting. But there's going to be financial systems implications, there are personnel implications. There's a lot of work to be done, and GSA's got a really tight timeline to get it done. They've got a lot of energy, so it's good.
What's your sense of why SBA, OPM, and the others were good? The administration didn't say it, but it sounded like they were kind of pilot programs, test programs to see how this would work. What's your sense of why those were good places to start?
I think they used the same underlying contract writing system was a good part. They also didn't have a lot of unique requirements. They still had some, but not a lot. They also tend to be smaller contracting shops. So that made sense. So you don't want to start off by trying to swallow the largest, the largest fish in the pond. You want to start with the minnows and figure out what it takes to do it before you try and expand your scope. I think that the fact that they're doing this in tranches makes a lot of sense.
Would it also make sense to move some of the 1102s that wind up at the agencies that are consolidated into GSA to GSA? Because it strikes me the bandwidth that's going to be necessary is potentially challenging at the same time that they've offered the fork to a lot of people.
Absolutely. And actually, you can see it within GSA, even that I believe that some of the 1102s from the Public Building Service are moving over to the Federal Acquisition Service to help there. I think that GSA is going to definitely want to look at other agencies and the 1102s, that they've got, the contract specialists they've got there, and see who would be willing to come to GSA, what they could do. There's going to be some retraining, though, involved in that, because if you've spent your entire career being a customer of GSA, using their contract vehicles and then doing a lot of standalone work, and you're suddenly the person awarding the GSA contract and doing work on behalf of others, it's a shift in mindset.
You anticipated my next question. I'm scribbling here risk analysis as far as what the agency will have to perform, not just in transitioning people from outside GSA into the agency, but bringing people from PBS to FAST, for example. I imagine that's a retraining process, too, that isn't quick. It's not you sit somebody in a classroom for 6 weeks and they all of a sudden can do exactly what you need them to do.
Well, PBS and GSA, PBS and the Federal Acquisition Service each use different contract writing systems to start with. They have different areas of expertise. The Public Building Service is an expert in construction, leasing, the management of buildings. They don't have a lot of experience awarding a GSA schedule contract and doing the price analysis that you'd want to do for that. They certainly don't have as much experience doing, if you were looking at the assisted acquisition service and the work that takes place there, which can be very complicated IT services or very mission critical work for Department of Defense. I believe is still the largest customer of AAS. Department of Homeland Security is up there. So learning to work with them and with those processes is going to be a challenge for everyone.
What does the agency more broadly look like as a result, potentially, of this restructuring, Emily? With all of this work coming into FAS, with the decommissioning of 18F under TTS, with TTS looking a lot smaller, and so on, what are the things to keep in mind as far as making sure that the intended result, which is a more effective, more efficient operation, happens the way that it's envisioned right now?
I think that to answer that question, you have to look back to the past. And why did GSA go from being a mandatory source to being a competitor for our agency's businesses? And it was that GSA got slow and complacent. Agencies felt that when they were forced to go through GSA to get the simplest products, it took too long. So when the acquisition reforms happened in the 90s, it changed that paradigm. It set everything on its head. GSA became very aggressive. It became very, very commercial and very customer focused. It wanted to thrill other agencies, really give them what they wanted, do it better, do it faster, do it cheaper, so that they could win the business and basically keep that function within GSA. So as GSA now goes to being mandatory, you've got a lot of potential wins. Rationalizing prices, reducing contract duplication. That's going to be good for industry. That's going to be good for agencies. All of these, and ultimately good for taxpayers because it should deliver savings. But only if it's done in a way that agencies still get what they need to do their jobs. So I think that the current GSA leadership is very focused on a commercial model and it's going to get that. But just making sure that part of GSA's DNA is preserved is going to be a longer term challenge.
Yeah, and that strikes me as maybe the hardest part of all this is that you're right, the current GSA leadership seems very focused on this. The next GSA leadership might not. The next GSA leadership might be focused on something else. And I wonder what the techniques are that will be necessary to maintain that momentum, to keep from falling back into that rut where there's complacency and so on, that those things don't happen again and you get the same results you got that caused the deconsolidation in the first place.
And I think if you actually look at another part of GSA, you might get part of the answer for that, which is that Office of Shared Services and Performance Improvement within the Office of Government-Wide Policy. I think that they do an excellent job in coming up with not just the standards and the common, the core common requirements, but also identifying service level agreements and how you're going to ensure and have the necessary reviews to make sure you're maintaining those service levels. Because at the end of the day, if agencies can't get what they need to meet their missions, no amount of savings is going to address that problem.
Yeah. OGP now is under the leadership of a mutual friend of ours, Larry Allen,
yes,
who knows GSA as well as anybody outside the organization that I know of. He's in there now. How do you expect to see OGP's role shift, not just basically because of his leadership, but based on the needs of the agency as the agency grows and evolves the way that we're discussing here?
So it couldn't be a better time to have Larry there because he really understands government contracting and he understands the schedules program. And as we look at reforms and expansions and rationalization of government contracts, he's going to be able to bring that expertise to bear and do the analysis and frankly explain the things that are uniquely government about the process to people who are really smart but haven't had a lot of time dealing with those. They haven't had a career of learning why the government does things the way it does. But and that's just looking at the Office of Acquisition Policy within GSA. He's got a far bigger job, though. He's also got asset and transportation management, evaluation sciences. He's got that Office of Shared Services and Performance Improvement, technology policy, the high performance green buildings. I mean, he's got a lot on his plate. there's the Office of Evidence and Analysis. I'm sure I'm forgetting an office there, and I don't mean to suggest it's not an important one, because they do so much important work in OGP. And they really do bring together so much of how the government operates. People forget that the federal management regulations come out of the Office of Government-Wide Policy also. So if you look at how the government's going to be changing its direction, how it's going to do a better job of operating as a single unit, those management regulations are going to be an incredible part of it.
The other part of GSA that you were responsible for was Public Building Service. Dan Matthews was your PBS commissioner when you were there. Yes. And PBS is another area where we've seen a lot of activity as far as the administration wanting to dispense with buildings in the inventory. What will you watch there to see how that process will evolve, how those decisions will be made, and so on, Emily?
So I think that there are a couple challenges right now. You've got an administration that wants to go big and bold on this, and wants to get the savings in place, and wants to get rid of the deferred maintenance obligations that have been building up year after year after year on the federal buildings, so that federal workers can be in good space doing their jobs, and we can be doing it in a very sustainable way, a cost-effective, sustainable manner going forward. Some of the challenges, the initial list of non-core assets needed better coordination with the agencies. Now, GSA quickly learned that lesson, pulled them back, and you can see as they bring out tranche by tranche now, they're doing a very good job of coordinating. You're not getting the same level of shock. Instead, you're seeing agencies admit, all right, this makes sense. There's a long-term plan. The bigger challenge they've got is how fast can they dispose of these? Because it takes between 1 to 5 years to dispose of a building once it's considered surplus property. At this point in time, we're just deeming them excess. So that process is just starting. And depending on the McKinney-Vento rules on whether state and local governments want to get engaged in the process, it can be a slow process. Now, they've got new tools. They will benefit from the Public Building Reform Board, which, as you mentioned, Dan Matthews is now a member of, and is doing great work there. But they've also got the Carper Water Resources bill that was passed, and I think signed into law early January, that gives them some additional tools on reinvesting to get properties ready for sale. It's just going to be a lot of work that they're trying to get done really fast. And Mike Peters has got a lot on his plate to get all of that done and coordinate as everyone returns to the office. And then we change where the office is.
We change where the office is where I want to end our conversation, Emily. I know that you had a great affinity for 1800 F Street. I understand that the building itself is, although very historic, is not in the best shape. And there's a dialogue that I've heard about going on inside the building where some folks are saying, well, we should just move GSA headquarters, and other folks are going, well, we can't. This is GSA headquarters. This is it. And I wonder how much impact that will have, number one, on the operations of the agency, and number two, on kind of the image of the agency, because so much of what people think about GSA has been tied to that location for long before the life of the agency itself, actually.
So if you remember, the GSA headquarters building was originally the Department of Interior, and the GSA Administrator's Office, which is a gorgeous office. I mean, the history major in me really appreciated that it was where the Teapot Dome scandal occurred, and that all sorts of other things have happened in that office. It's a beautiful space. It also has single pane glass windows, a non-working chimney, and fireplace, because it's the chimney's right next to the air return. So if you set a fire, it could set the entire building on fire. And it can get quite chilly in that office from time to time. I'm not complaining about it. I loved every minute in it. But the agency's bigger than the building. And the best part of that building was it's close to OMB, it's close to OPM, it's the management agencies are near each other. And it makes it easy to coordinate in person, to go to meetings. There's nothing. 1800 F Street itself doesn't have the only opportunity to do that. There are other ways that could happen. Consolidation could take place, whether agencies move into GSA, whether GSA moves out and into space with other agencies. GSA is going to still do its job.
There's a ton more I'd like to cover with you, so I'll have to ask you to come back and continue the conversation, Emily. It's great to catch up with you.
I would love it, and it's always wonderful being with you, Francis.
You can read more about the changes coming at GSA on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. FedGov Today is back from Sea Air Space, the Navy League's annual Sea Services Conference at National Harbor, right across the Potomac from D.C. You'll learn what Navy, Marine Corps, and Coast Guard leaders are prioritizing in the weeks and months ahead on FedGov Today TV, next Sunday morning at 10:30 on ABC7 in Washington and the FedGov Today YouTube channel. And you can watch every FedGov Today TV show on demand at fedgovtoday.com. The Internal Revenue Service gets a thumbs up on financial management. You'll learn about that on the next FedGov Today podcast. That's coming next Tuesday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else you get your shows. And you can listen to all of our podcasts on demand at fedgovtoday.com. I'm Francis Rose. Thanks very much for listening.